All right, well, this week's assignment was the Focus on Teachers vlog, and for this assignment, I got to talk with my cooperating teacher as well as attending the conference in Richmond this weekend. I talked with probably 10 to 15 teachers there, and I'm really sort of combining all that they've said for my response. They had a very wide variety of opinions on all different aspects of teaching. I'm sure that's just reflected in their classroom as well. And I'm not sure that there's really one style or approach that's right and one that's wrong, but they definitely are very different. Something that everybody talks about in education a lot is standards, and almost every teacher I talked to said that standards and having high expectations is a reality in today's classroom and for today's teachers. And that's not really unique to teaching. That's the way that all of our society is. The advice I was given was expect to be frustrated by standards from time to time, but don't see them as your enemy. They're a framework for which that you're working within. And even the most tight pacing guide does still give room for individual decisions and being able to create your own lessons, explore other topics, and engage students in what they're interested in. Standards definitely have a reputation of being a bad thing, but most of the teachers I talked with said that they are ultimately needed. That was something that I didn't necessarily expect to get from a group of teachers. One thing that came up was the idea of teachers deciding that, oh, the SOLs, whatever, they're not what's right for my students. But I asked a couple of folks specifically about that and got the consistent response that if you don't cover what's on the SOLs, you're ultimately doing your students a disservice. And even though we want to promote higher level thinking and understanding, ultimately they have to pass that test, and anything that you can do to get them to pass that test is a good thing on your part. If you stop there, that's when you're not really accomplishing what you need to be accomplishing, and that's where the standards can become a hindrance. Standards can be stressful. No teacher denied that. Several said that the stress level really depends on how engaged the students are, which has a lot to do with their home life, and that it also varies a lot between schools, usually as a result of the principal and the school district and how well the students are performing on those tests. Philosophy varied a lot. One thing that I thought was very interesting was one of the teachers that I talked to made a point that none of the others did, and that is that teaching is a job. And at the end of the day, you still have a job to do. And I really liked that a lot. I think that teaching's more than just a regular job, but at the end of the day, you are being paid to do a specific thing, and you have to do that. Any job, if you don't do your job, you get fired. With teachers, part of that is producing results. All those teachers I talked to were very student-centered and said what ultimately matters is doing what your students need. Doing what's best for them and being a friend and a support system for them, because you don't necessarily know what your students are going through at home, and they might not get that support anywhere else. And some days you truly just need to be a friend, and that you're an adult that takes interest in their life, and that's something they might not have from anybody else. And that definitely is important to me, thinking about going into the classroom and what I might be up against, and knowing what some of my students, even at a relatively good school, what their home life is like. I can imagine that it can be pretty rough for a lot of students. It's easy to get run down as a teacher. A lot of folks said that, actually everybody, and that you have to take personal time. You get personal days, and you also need to take time to explore your other hobbies and interests, and don't let teaching completely take over your life, because many of the teachers have seen new folks come in with a lot of energy and enthusiasm, work 20 hours a day for a year and then quit and never go near a school again, and that's not what I want to become at all. The stresses that they talked about mainly had to were talking about their first year and balancing teaching with life, because there is a lot going on, and that's something that I'm definitely expecting to be an issue, and definitely getting a crash course in what it's like to have another job with being in the schools this semester. I can imagine that first year is going to be hectic beyond belief. Teaching's not a 9-to-5 job, and having the fact that it does follow you home in lesson plans, grading, and parental contact is a stress, particularly depending on the support level that you get from the parents. Either too little or too much, it apparently can be equally stressful, and I hadn't really thought about that. But going through school, I definitely know of a few parents who probably bugged the teachers more than they care to think about. The other stress can be parents that just don't care at all, and don't give that support that the students need, and you really can't get anywhere with them either. I was told first year is the worst. If you make it through first year and you still want to teach, you're doing pretty well. A couple of teachers commented that the prep programs churn out grads that are really, really idealistic and really, really prepared to work with students that don't actually exist. That we are trained to talk about the what ifs and not always think about the day-to-day realities of teaching, and making that adjustment from student mentality to teacher mentality can be really stressful, and at times very draining when you realize that this might not be what I expected it to be. Perceived or actual lack of support from the central administration and your principal is something that teachers commented on being a major stress, as well as having extracurriculars such as coaching pushed on to the younger teachers almost sets them up for failure, and definitely adds a lot of stress to their life, that you really have to look at the district when you're applying for jobs. As for life for a new teachers are supposed to do it all. They are supposed to be the most positive. They are supposed to be coming out of grad school knowing all the new technology, new teaching techniques, and are promptly given all of the undesirable jobs like lunch duty, extracurriculars, coaching, supervising ISS, helping out in the office, making copies. Whatever the veteran teachers don't want to do tends to get pushed onto the new teachers. And one teacher commented that you're almost set up to be overwhelmed and fail. Definitely sounds like a structural problem with education, but it's definitely something to think about. One teacher described the first year almost as a hazing experience by the other teachers, in saying that you're given so much to do with such high expectations and sometimes very little support, that it feels like hazing. Thought that was an interesting way of putting it, and I hope that's not the reality, but I guess it could be. With being a new teacher, you're expected to be a high performer because you're straight out of grad school. You have new ideas and better content knowledge than many of the veteran teachers. And the first year is exciting, but it's also exhausting, and you have to take time for yourself. Otherwise, you won't make it to year 2. Thought that was an interesting point to be made as well. And the final prompt was what life outside of the classroom's like for a teacher, and it varies tremendously, both by marital status, geography, and really you just have to take time to maintain your own interests and your own relationships, your own hobbies, so that you are able to go back into the classroom rejuvenated the next day. Something that I really thought made a lot of sense to me was that teaching can be your passion, but it cannot be your life. After all, at the end of the day, it is still a job.